Hello and welcome to our webinar. This is our last webinar for the year in risk management. Today we're going to be talking about, is risk management broken, and is AI somehow able to help risk management as a whole, right? Well, I'm Guilherme Barbassa. I'm Actio's CEO, and today we'll have the pleasure of being joined by Ken Baker. Ken is a risk management instructor at RIMS, New York, and a consultant as well. And John McLaughlin, ex-KPMG, PwC, BDO, with over 40 years in ERM, internal audit, and GRC. And we're going to have the pleasure of picking their brains today with this very interesting topic. Welcome, John. Welcome, Ken.
Thanks, Guilherme.
Thanks, Guilherme. It's great to be here.
It doesn't feel like 40 years.
Yeah, goes fast, right?
Yeah.
Well, before we jump in, I'd like to just have a few organization items get out of the way. One is a feedback form. So by the end of this webinar, we're going to put a feedback form on the chat. And if our audience has 2 minutes to fill it out, it really helps us getting to know, how can we make this experience better for you? And what do you really want to hear for next topics of webinars and so on, right? So I'd ask you guys to take these 2 minutes and help us improve the experience for next webinars. And also about questions. So feel free to put your questions in the chat, okay? We're going to be monitoring the chat and try to answer the questions as they come along. But if we don't get to them during our conversation, we're reserving a few minutes in the end to address the questions. So please interact with us. Please feel free to put the questions here for us to answer more directly to your needs, right? And what you want to hear us talk about, right? And also, if you want to have one-on-one conversations with us, feel free to reach out and contact us. You can put here in the chat or just contact us directly. If you want us to reach out to have one-on-one conversations, you can just put in the chat here, talk, and we'll reach out to you to have a more specific talk about your organizations. Well, we had recently the State of Risk report published by Poole School of Management in North Carolina State University, released. And this is a report that has been following up on risk management for many years now. And they interview many organizations, like over 200, if I believe it's 270 organizations, asking, the same questions year over year. And this last report, for me, it came with some pretty alarming numbers, right? So, and these numbers put in question the effectiveness of risk management as a discipline, as an effective management discipline. So some of these numbers are 86% of large corporations that filled in the survey had operational surprises in the last 5 years. That is, risk management to a certain degree failed, right? Because risk management is there to prevent these surprises, right? And also, 11% of organizations, only 11%, believe that risk management provides a strategic advantage. That number is very low, right? So these were some of the findings in this report. I recommend reading the full report. It's very interesting. And before I ask John and Ken, their perception on these numbers and the report, I would like to ask you, our audience, a question where you can interact with us and have your perception also on these same topics. So, in your organization, have you seen the volume and complexity of risk increasing over the last 5 years? You should have a pop-up on your Teams so you can answer and we can get your feedback here. Okay, so partial feedback coming in, 100% yes. So I think we can pretty much establish that, yes, complexity and volume is increasing through year over year, right? And this fits in very much with the answers we got in the report as well. So yeah, it fell to 92 and 1, not sure, right? But I think we still have a overwhelming yes here. So, Ken, does these answers or what's reporting on risk on this report in these numbers I put here, does it fit with your perception of what's going on in risk management as a whole?
Well, it's funny because I'm used to seeing these surveys that were done or these research papers that were done in the early 2010s. There's like 3 of them, like Hoyt and Liebenberg, Farrell and Gallagher, and so forth, that talk about they did comparisons of companies that use ERM that are publicly traded and whether if they have a mature risk management system, how they do compared to the rest of the Fortune 500 index. And it turns out that they tend to outperform it. So they've got multiple papers that say that having an ERM system is better than nothing. It is better than not having anything. But I find it concerning, actually, that the Pool School has come up with these survey results. I believe them, but it's unfortunate that people aren't driving more value from it. I think we would expect to see the process and the discipline kind of evolve over time to add more value, and it just doesn't seem like it's improving that way.
It's going sideways, right? It's not getting worse or adding less value.
Yeah,
but it's
not gaining.
It's not gaining, which is pretty worrisome by itself, right?
Exactly.
John, what are your perceptions on this report's?
So, what's funny is the report was released earlier this year, and as you had indicated, this survey's been done. It's actually been done, I think, for 16 years. So 16th edition. And the Poole College of Management, in my view, I think Ken probably shares this view, is that it's not a consulting firm. It's, they're providing objective information about the state of risk management. And the survey questions really have been pretty consistent over that 16-year period. So you have a nice basis of information. And looking at it this year, it sort of hit me in the face in that this question of the volume and complexity of risks, mostly or extensively, increasing in 5 years, was at 60-some%. And if you broke that down, the financial services organizations that responded, it was like 57%. and of public companies, 75%. And so look at that and say, financial services, heavily regulated, must have risk management functions. They're spending a lot of money on risk management. JP Morgan Chase spent close to $1 billion in risk management 2 years ago, and what they define as risk management. And yet this group of heavily regulated, highly risk managed organizations are still seeing the volume and complexity increasing. It was startling to look back and say that number really hasn't changed over 16 years. It continues to evolve, and the risk management function is not mitigating that risk necessarily. A bit of conjecture on my part, but look back at the statistics and say, where are we? It's gone sideways, as you just said, Guillermo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So risk management has the purpose of reducing and mitigating risk in the organizations, right? Not just reporting risk.
Right.
How do you see ERM today focused on that purpose of reducing risk? And how many companies, I mean, in your experience, do you see them using risk, calling it out as risk management, but actually just talking about reporting risk upwards, right? Which wouldn't have as much strategic value, right? Ken, could you?
Well, I've seen, where I'm working at is I'm often getting companies started on the journey. So I kind of see the same thing. They don't know what's going on. They don't know what they're doing. And then we set up a process, and then all of a sudden they're able to report and so forth. But it takes a little bit of time to get the maturity to really start adding the value. It's great to start asking the questions, what are our risks and what are we doing about them? And then the next thing is to actually enact that, to say, okay, these are the risks, these are the things we need to do to mitigate them, actually executing that program. And I've seen successful leaders do that, including one personally who's now the city manager of the city of Edmonton. So he's got the right attitude toward risk. God bless him. He's doing great. But too many organizations, they don't have the resources or the wherewithal to be linking the risks to their actual actions that they have to do to mitigate them, either at the strategic or the operational level.
It's funny, if I could just interject there, is the definition of enterprise risk management is all about strategy, right? And so I can't recall it right offhand, but I think all the participants in here understand that it's about strategy. But Jeremy, as you started, the other statistic you shared is, the percentage who believe that ERM mostly or extensively provides strategic advantage was an underwhelming 11%. And then looking at least two sectors, the financial services sector was 8%. And for public companies, it was only 15%. So there's clearly a paradox here. You've got ERM. It's not focused on strategy. And the statistics are saying that the volume and complexity is increasing. So something's broken, in my view. And you've got 16 years of these statistics proving that it is broken. And even those who are participating today, the 93% indicated that too. So something's got to change. And there are causes for it too, as Ken is alluding to there.
Yeah. I think we can dive now into causes. So why is this happening? But before we go there, let me ask something else to our audience. Let's run another quick survey here, talking about this connection of strategy and risk, right? So do you believe your ERM program is providing a strategic advantage to your organization? We should have here, another pop-up with this question. So is your ERM program providing a strategic advantage to your organization? Okay. Now we're seeing more of a mix of answers and a lot unsure, right? Our audience is made up basically of risk management practitioners in their own organizations, right? And I also think it's worrying when the risk management people are not sure if risk management in their organization is filling in their role within providing a strategic advantage. Statistics that Ken brought was very interesting in the beginning, right? Who has enterprise risk management does have some kind of advantage because they are valued more, right, Ken? But it clearly seems like a problem as well, right? Or we have 74% of our respondents do not know that it's adding strategic advantage, right? So that number is very high and in line with what we got in the report as well. That was around those numbers, right? Why? Why is this happening, right? Why is risk management not being perceived as or not being a strategic advantage to companies that adopt this methodology or this practice?
You know, before we even go there, if I could just point out, there was one other statistic that's almost indicting on this failure, is that it was the question of experiencing significant operational surprises in the past 5 years. And that number was even greater than the previous statistic, which was 74% are still seeing these surprises. And that's moderated. I looked at the survey from 5 years ago, and 5 years ago, that same statistic was 82%. So it's trending down, but over 5 years, you would think that it might trend down a little greater. But that number now, that's 74% experiencing significant operational surprises in the last 5 years, in public companies is 87%. And public companies are probably more likely to have some kind of ERM program. Financial services, it was 72%. Is that you definitely want to avoid surprises. I mean, I don't know if a CEO hasn't said to me, I need to avoid surprises to my investors, to my board, yet surprises persist. And yet they have enterprise risk management programs. So that is even, I think, almost more indicting that the process is not working. In terms of the causes, I don't have the answers. I may have a couple ideas, and I might preempt Ken here, but I mean, a couple thoughts is that I think there are organizations that have robust risk inventories. I mean, if you look at the way ERM starts, or maybe it's refreshed, is that you develop an inventory of risks. And it could be a group of 300 risks, which a risk manager might actually oversee, but it's ultimately distilled to 20, say. Is that thinking of those 20 risks, as robust as it may appear, can be a blessing and a curse. Because in a way the blessing is you have an understanding of these risks, but things change. Just as those statistics says, these operational surprises have happened in the last 5 years, is it brings in complacency. And so I'm very familiar with an organization. I serve on a board, and we have a risk inventory. And when 3-4 years ago, when inflation became an emerging issue, 9% inflation had not happened in 40 years, is that we were presented as a board with this risk inventory, and yet inflation was not in the risk inventory. And so this pride of, hey, we have our top 20 risks, they're well understood, they're described, is that management failed to recognize that 9% inflation was going to impact maybe 14 of those 20 risks. So this complacency of the risk manager and the organization is problematic. And it may be contributing to this, as being a cause of this discrepancy, this paradox we have between the strategy and the operational surprises.
Yeah, and why do you think this complacency happens? Where does it come from?
If you're asking me, I think it's just not receiving attention. I think the world is getting more complicated by the day, by the hour, as that there are competing priorities. I think too, resources are always limited, and it's either a resource of time or money or attention that's just giving less emphasis on ERM. The investment doesn't necessarily justify the benefit, which is what the survey from the Poole College of Management had indicated too. This is what those 270 some odd respondents had indicated, is that they're not quite sure the benefit is there for what they're doing now.
Okay. So the cost value return value may not have this the perception that is worth it, or the way that it's done today, right? You also mentioned the world is getting more complicated, right? The volume of things going on and to be monitored and is increasing, and resources, which is attached to the other point that you mentioned, is also very disputed within the companies. Where do we put these resources and attention and management eyeballs, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What about you, Ken? Why is this happening in your perception, in your opinion?
Just to build on what John has said, I think that there's a lot of organizations who kind of treat this still as a checkbox exercise. So they build a risk register and they don't really take it much beyond that. If to drive the benefits from an ERM program, you really want to build it towards risk maturity. And that means, building out your processes and so forth, and evolving your communication systems and your visioning systems to try to get a better grip on emerging risks and your strategic risks, like linking risk to strategy, which we talked about is an issue that shouldn't be happening because it's really the crux of ERM. But I think a lot of it is just having, like you said, having the resources, having the leadership buy-in to commit to being a more risk mature organization. I remember reading a book called Risk, a User's Guide by General Stanley McChrystal, where he talks about in his time in the military, they did lots of scenario planning, but the scenarios often didn't work out the way they expected them to. So there'd be some variable that would not be correct in their scenario. So when it came to the real deal, it didn't work out. So then the focus becomes not necessarily on predicting risks, but on resilience and making sure that you're ready for whatever comes your way. So that's I think that's one thing I've noticed a trend lately is there's a focus towards resilience as opposed to predictability, because you can't see them all coming. And this is I think these numbers bear that out. There's always going to be some surprises that come that are going to get through what you've tried to predict.
Okay.
So you can't predict them all.
Resilience, we can read as being able to absorb the impacts or being able to answer quickly to new facts, right? So how, knowing many organizations, ERM processes, how are they ready, or how resilient are they when we think about this time to action once you have new information coming in? Are the processes ready for that, or are they rigid and bureaucratic, and how would you assess the resilience in that aspect?
Well, I think the most recent example we have is COVID, where everybody had to jump in, and all of a sudden, your supply chains are haywire. Your customers can't buy your product. So major upheaval for organizations, and they had a very short amount of time to figure out plans to deal with shortcomings in their supply chain, or health guidelines or regulations that came out where people had to wear masks or they couldn't go outside or whatever. So a lot of organizations had to think on their feet very quickly and come up with something, a way to survive, and many didn't. So that was a lot of the ones I've seen that have come through have said, well, we figured out a way this time, so we don't really need to do risk management. We'll just, take things as they come.
Can I just add to that too?
Yes.
So, Jeremy, just responding to what you said, and then also adding what Ken had indicated. There was another survey, and it was slightly different, and it was by McKinsey. Actually, the name of it is Governance, Risk, and Compliance, a New Lens on Best Practices, right? So another survey, slightly different perspective from McKinsey, is that they're indicating that there's sort of a widespread shortcoming in GRC. Okay, so enterprise risk management is a part of GRC. And there were 5 areas that they basically summarized. And we've just hit on a couple of these that happen to be somewhat consistent with what this Poole College of Management was indicating. One was the lack of integration, is that it's fragmented in that risk is often overseen by the CFO. Maybe that's because insurance rolls through there. But then there's the compliance aspect, which rolls through generally the general counsel's office. And that is that the board is only getting episodic, what they called views on risk management. And that may be quarterly or annually or so. And so this activity, this siloed approach, CFO, general counsel, the board, is it's diverting from strategy. And strategies have to be moving faster, as we're indicating here. The second thing that they pointed out was technology underutilization, is that there was 42% had indicated that their GRC systems need improvement. So there's a technology piece that they recognize. The third area was undervaluing risk leadership. And what they pointed out was that the risk manager reported at least one level or two below the CEO level. And therefore, risk management becomes more what they called operationalized. The fourth thing was weak alignment with incentives. 68% of respondents said that they do not tie executive comp with compliance, culture, ethics. And the fifth area was the failure to advance from tactical to strategic, meaning that there's insufficient effort around what Ken was just indicating around like scenario planning, stress testing, and what they called horizon scanning, right? So scenario planning again.
Yep.
So this was in May of 2025. These findings from, I think, McKinsey are very interesting in the light of what we're seeing with the Poole College of Management. And what you're asking about these causes, Guilherme, is like, it's sort of, the picture is becoming clearer that something has to change. And I found it interesting is that this technology underutilization, and when we talked about this webinar and AI and how is it going to change this dynamic? And the answer is it has to change the dynamic. It'll change what everyone on this call is thinking about. But the question is how.
I took a bunch of notes here while you were talking about the causes, right? And I'd like to go through some of them just to make sure that I understood correctly, right? So some of the causes, one is world is getting more complex, right? It's an overload of information. It's an overload of data. that impact organizations. So this is one of the causes, and also resources. Resource allocation to risk management hasn't followed up this increased complexity. So more information is being lost or not being able to be processed because you just don't have people enough. You don't have, like I said, eyeballs on what's going on in the market enough, right? Um, Ken talked about also being treated as like a checkbox. So the risk management being treated as a checkbox or some task I have to do bureaucratically, to fulfill some other departments' objectives, which has maybe little to do with me, right? So that plus communication plus the executives buy-in, which John talked about also, like the executive compensation not being attached to this. I'm interpreting this as engagement, right? This lack of engagement from the corporation and from the people within this corporation with the whole process. Is that one of the causes that we can attribute? Yeah.
Well, there's several that you would indicate it there. Like my reaction to when you say communication is I'm not joking by saying every time I get involved with a company and help like refresh an ERM program or start it, is that people will say, we just don't communicate effectively, or we're not communicating still enough. I returned to a company recently. I did some work for them 5 years ago, and they said, yeah, communication was an issue back then. It's getting better, but it's still an issue. And Jeremy, Ken, we talked before about these risk factors that I've talked about that were brought about by this Professor Abkowitz, and communication is one of those 10 risk factors as well. About just real quickly about the culture and the compensation is that the other question I ask is, yes, you are rewarding star performers, and it may be through some metric. And I've asked the question and generally get a stunned response of, have you ever rewarded someone on courage? And the courage being that they pointed out a problem that no one else was willing to point out. And it's always a complicated problem. There's no simple solution to it. But recognizing someone for standing up for their courage. And usually these problems are risk management issues.
Yeah. When I see executive compensations, I see a very uneven balance, right? When we think about risk and return, right? We have a very powerful force pushing return. So executive compensation bonuses for, growth, for profitability, for any metric you may use for return, but nothing on the other side, right? What risks are you willing to take in reaching for that return? So, executive compensation is a very uneven balance when we think risk return within organizations, right? It's a powerful force for return, but it doesn't show up on risk management, right?
Well, it's a very sensitive topic too.
Yeah.
And, what we're talking about are qualitative and quantitative factors that roll into, well, what should that compensation be? What should that reward be? And clearly the qualitative factors are less easily defined or less easily measured, right, than a quantitative factor.
Okay. And Ken also mentioned the resilience. I thought that was very interesting. Risk management perceived as being also not avoiding risks, but being able to react quickly to risks because we are not able, when you assume that you're not able to monitor everything and keep up and foresee every possible risk, right? Like the general you mentioned, right?
Right. Yes.
You have to prepare yourself to react quickly
Mhm.
if these unexpected scenarios happen, and they will happen, right?
Oh yeah.
Uh, so risk management, and not only as reducing the probability of it happening, but being quick and reducing the impact, and if it comes to happen, right?
Mhm. And
I
just to build
tried
on
to
one
go
John's,
ahead.
so go ahead.
No, go ahead, Ken.
I was going to say, just to build on John's comments about communication, one of the things that I found interesting too is that there are organizations that don't, like you'll do your quarterly risk assessment or your half-year risk assessment or your annual report to the board. And if you really need information, is an annual report really often enough? Is that timely enough to get the information that you need? And I would say usually the answer would be no. So I know one successful example I had in my past is when I worked for the city of Edmonton, our CFO had a placemat of our top 10 risks laminated and put in front of every deputy city manager. So when they had the executive team, every time they met, they pulled out this card and they looked at them all, and it kept them top of mind. So they're thinking about risks in their decision making. And that's really what you want. The ultimate tool, the ultimate purpose of VRM is to inform better decision making.
Yeah.
So if these people have risk awareness when they're making their decisions, that's where you have the success of the program. I'm enjoying that now where I work, where I have enough of a conduit to the board or to the executive team to say, I can ask a question and they'll say, hey, that's a good question. And then they can act on that. Or when they look at risk assessment, they can say, oh, this risk has really gone up. Do we need to contribute more resources there? My friend Rob Quayle has said that if you aren't affecting executive decision making, you're not doing ERM. So to have that happening, that's a bonus. So it can be done, but you need to be able to make sure that your leadership is thinking of risk. They have risk awareness themselves. They buy into the program, and they also are looking at risks, thinking about what are the risks of doing this, and if they don't know the risks, call their people and say, hey, do an assessment on this for me.
Yeah, perfect. And that's a great segue for the question that we have here on the chat. I'm going to read it out for you too. Thinking about the near-term risk global profile, maybe the concerning trends you have mentioned in the why discussion will not change quickly in a favorable way. What would you recommend for organizations and companies to focus on with the objective of putting risk on the strategy and agile decision conversation?
It's a great question. Here's my reaction to that is I think that the person who asked that question in the first sentence is spot on, is that getting some change in the near term is difficult. I've talked before, Guilherme and Ken, about these factors and instituting these factors into the culture and into the thinking. So there are individuals within an organization, call it the executive level, the senior leadership level, that is most involved in strategy setting. Is that my view is that, yes, you have to have these risk inventories, but you need to change the thinking in the culture. And the easiest way to change the thinking in the culture is taking these 10 risk factors, and I can tell you them very quickly, but having those factors instilled in the thinking of those that are making strategic decisions for the company. And it may not sound all that direct, but in my mind it is. And the first is design and construction flaws. The second is deferred maintenance. The third is economic pressure. The fourth is scheduling constraints. Inadequate training is the fifth. Not following procedures is the sixth. Lack of planning and preparedness that Ken had mentioned earlier, scenario planning, General McChrystal had indicated that, is the seventh. Communication failure was 8. And then the two other ones were arrogance, 9, and political agendas, 10. And so my point is that Abgewitz has done this study, had determined that these factors all contributed to some catastrophe, and these were bad catastrophes. And I recommend those on this call. I mean, get that book, Paul Abgewitz, Risk Management. Just Google that. Is that you have to change the thinking in the organization. Call it quasi-culture, to be thinking about that. And in particular, those that are determining the strategies should be instilling those factors in their thinking to make sure that they can execute those strategies flawlessly, which is pretty tough to do.
Okay, perfect. That's a very good comment. I'm gonna jump into our next segment here, which is a demonstration of how an AI, like a multi-agent AI, could tackle some of the causes that we talked about here. So I'm going to try to be very practical and show a real case of something that is a project that is going on now. And I'm going to refer back to these causes that we've been talking about. But before I jump into that, just another quick poll with our audience. So, has your organization experienced significant operational surprise within the last 5 years? This was also a question from the North Carolina poll, right? And let's hear about you guys. Okay, overwhelmingly yes for now. Some not sure, and one no from now. So, yeah, these numbers are also we're coming very close to what the report came up with 270 organizations, but we have a lot smaller sample, but the numbers are very similar, right? So 72% said yes, they have experienced operational surprise within the last 5 years. I should exclude COVID because I think that caught everybody by surprise, right? But I should have done that before I asked the question. So John already answered here with the name of the book and author, right? That he mentioned in his talk here.
Yeah, close enough, right?
Okay. So let's jump into the next segment, because that is to take a look at a solution that incorporates AI or leverages AI to tackle some of these causes that we talked about of the failure in ERMs, right? So it's not going to tackle all of the causes, but I think communication, information overflow definitely will can be dealt with artificial intelligence, because it's capable of treating a lot of information at once and processing all of this information that would be otherwise humanly impossible. And this resilience, this time to action as well. I think this solution that we're gonna show here will tackle mainly these 3 causes. Communication, so get people involved with the process and know what's going on and what's your part in the whole. Information overload and time to action, right? Quickly process what's going on in the world and ask for an action, a specific action for that. So let me share my screen with you. And let's dive into this. So I chose to use the tool that we're using in this project, okay? And this tool is the N8N. So just curiosity here for the people that want to know more details about this tool. And here we have each of these boxes is an AI agent that has a task to do, right? It's going to collect data from the previous agents, collect data from outside the organization or within the organization, and do some processing on that information and deliver something else to the next agent. So as you can see here, we have a multi-agent. So the sequence of these agents interacting between themselves will generate an output, right? And the purpose of this particular agent or multi-agent is to monitor all of the risks or all of the information that is going on and in the world relative to this particular business and identify what is relevant given that company's risks, given that company's strategy, and that company's business as a whole. So it will connect with information sources, triage what's relevant, understand if it's relevant for that particular company, and if it identifies relevance, a new fact that alters the importance of some risk or identifies a new risk, it will proactively engage with the organization, with the people in the organization, and ask them to reassess a risk if it's thinks it's changing the risk level for a particular risk, or assess a new risk. So this is the problem that it's supposed to solve, right? The overflow of information. So it would be humanly impossible to be monitoring everything at once. So this multi-agent solution would do that for the company. I'm going to take you step by step then how it's doing this for you to know the idea of like how AI could tackle these particular causes that we talked about. So I'll go deeper here into one of these, the first trigger. So it starts off with a time trigger, a schedule trigger, for example, every day. This first agent, AI agent, it will reach out within the ERM software of the company and read all of the risks that are there in the risk roster in this company. So it'll pick up all of the risks that are there, process it, and take it to the next level, which will categorize these risks, and it will add internal context to these risks. So it will cross-reference the internal context with the risks that are existing. So what do I call internal context? In our previous conversation here with Ken and John, we mentioned inflation. right? 9% inflation, nobody foresaw that. And 9% inflation could be a very high risk for some companies and a minor or not even a risk at all for another company. So how does the agent know that this particular risk is relevant to that particular company? So this agent will pick up this information that is coming from all the way here, this other process that is also a collection of agents. This process has the objective of understanding that particular business so that it will understand if that risk is relevant for that business, right? So it will collect organizational data. It will, from the software itself, and it will have many other agents here, each agent focused on understanding a particular perspective of that business. So finance, for example, this agent will be asking, let me go into the detail, right? It will be asking or collecting information about the financial structure of that company. Is it leveraged? Is it what kind of debt? What is the debt structure like? Okay, so it will collect all of this information, revenue, margin trends, cost structure, debt profile, CapEx, OpEx, working capital information, and feed in to a database all of this information. So how will they collect this information? It can reach out to the people that are registered in the software and ask them to fill in a form or to as a chatbot, right? So you can have many models of how to collect this information and feed in here. So from time to time, this workflow will be running, and you can say, oh, I need to update my financial information every quarter, for example. But the value chain of the company may not change as often. Maybe you just have to update that once a year. But operations, you may have to collect or validate if it's still, the information here is still valid every month, for example. So every every agent here will be collecting its own data set that feeds into this model. And all of this will be fed into a database, a final context generator, which will interpret all of this information and, in essence, understand what's that business and everything that is relevant for that business risk-wise. This context generator feeds in the database. That will go back here where we were previously, cross-reference with the risks that already exists and are being monitored, right? So here we see two lines. One is, okay, we have a risk that we already know, but something happened internally in our context, right, that changes the level of this risk. So from this point on, you can already trigger the need for a reassessment of that risk. So the end user that is using the ERM software will get an alert saying, hi, we just detected that your cost structure of your products has changed significantly. This impacts this, and this risks. Please reassess these risks given this new context. So it's something that has changed internally that impacts the risks. So this agent would trigger this information or this need through the ERM software, right? And this context and this collection of risks will be added in the next block here, external intelligence scenarios and governance, with new data coming from outside the organization. So this agent is able to monitor outside information through websites, forms, regulations that are posted in the internet by regulatory bodies. It's constantly reading what's going on in these, and for each company, each business, it will vary, like what's relevant for us to be monitoring. And it will be constantly reading this outside information and cross-referencing with the risks that we already have and with the context. So again, if there's a news saying that inflation has gone to, or is projected to go to 9% or 10%, this news that was read in a source that we established will cross-reference, is information of inflation at 9% relevant for this business? Does it impact any of the risks that we already have monitored? And if it does, it will move on to the next agent, that is the scenario and the impact agent that helps do this cross-referencing, and consolidation and narrative agent. So before it reaches out to people through the ERM software, it will just refine this narrative, right, to have something more palatable for the end user. And finally, a governance and quality agent, just making sure that this is really relevant. So cross-referencing with other data that we have done in the past and alerts that we have issued in the past. And finally, interacting with the ERM software, saying, hi, I've detected a possible new risk. It is this. It will impact your strategic planning or your operations. So please assess if you should include this new risk detected in your roster, your risk roster, right? So we have two different outputs: new risks detected for that particular business, right? Because it cross-referenced with the information that collected from the business, and the need of reassessment for risks that we already know exists. So something has changed, be it externally or internally, you should look at this risk again and reassess it. So this model, when we talk about resilience or time to action, it would be, the purpose is to reduce this time to action, because it's a model that is constantly reading the environment and the internal changes. And it has a very short time to notification of saying, hey, look at this, right? We also talk about communication here, especially the proactive reach out to key people for them to reassess the risks. And We talked about technology needed, right? One of the causes was lack of technology. And mainly the overload of information, because this is AI. There's no human collecting the data and processing. There's the human making the decision in the end, right? But this collection of information, you can add hundreds of sites to be monitored, which would be humanly impossible. So it also treats one of the causes that we talked about, that is the overload of information. I tried to be quick because I saw we were running out of time. This project is going on with energy company, right? Electrical energy company, and it's reality already, right? It's not something like we're thinking of doing something in the long run or what AI is possibly can do. It's something that is being done, right? Thank you very much, Ken and John, once more for this talk. It's always very good talking to you.
Same here.
And
yeah,
I hope I'll see you next time. Oh, for our audience, just one reminder, the feedback form is here in the chat. Whoever has a few minutes, please fill it in for us. And if you guys want to talk to John or Ken, feel free to reach out with myself also. It's always a pleasure talking to you guys. John?
Thanks for the opportunity, BRMA.
Oh, I thank
Thanks
you.
very much, Cameron. It was great to do this. Appreciate it.
All right.
All right. Take
Thank
care,
you.
guys. All right. Bye-bye.
All the best, everyone. Take care.